This is 030, the only daily roundup of the day's arts and entertainment news on British television. These are the headlining stories. The sun sets on Mr. Moonlight. Show business mourns the passing of entertainer Frankie Vaughan, the man who went from variety crooner to Hollywood matinee idol. The great TV switch-off plans are announced to turn off our current TV sets, possibly within 6 years, as digital takes over. And we meet the man behind the mask, the film world's own monkey man, star of Instinct, Greystoke and Congo, ape specialist Peter Elliott joins us live here in the 030 studio. Hello, welcome to 030. I'm Christopher Price. Thanks for joining me. He was a 60s superstar, a genuine all-round entertainer who topped the charts, conquered Las Vegas, and made a film with Marilyn Monroe. Tonight, the world of show business has been paying tribute to the man they knew as Mr. Moonlight, Frankie Vaughan, of course. Now, the entertainer died on Friday at the age of 71. He had had surgery earlier this year for heart problems. Looking back on his career for 030, here's Robert Hall.
He was the debonair 50s crooner with matinee idol looks and an instantly recognisable theme song. Frankie Vaughan had had a tough Liverpool upbringing. The only Jewish boy in the school, he took to fighting, but the local boys' club saved him from going off the rails. He became a staunch supporter of youth clubs and a government advisor on juvenile delinquency. In the 60s, he'd travelled to Glasgow to help persuade the city's gangs to give up their weapons.
Oh my, but it's stifling.
In our cinemas, Vaughan sang with Marilyn Monroe, but he spurned the trappings of stardom, preferring life back home with his wife Stella. His live performances attracted sell-out audiences, and Frankie loved every high-kicking minute.
Sex appeal, flirtation, it's a game, it's a lovely game that comes backwards and forwards. So it's all very healthy and it's fun, and they kiss me and they touch me and Stella doesn't mind it. And leave the rest to me.
Frankie Vaughan's charm and that old-fashioned sex appeal sustained a long and successful career. A simple approach that never failed him.
He certainly was a showman. Joining me throughout this edition of 030 is our regular entertainment expert, Rick Skye. Rick, thanks very much for coming in. Of course, he was one of the country's biggest stars during his time, but somehow he managed to keep a star quality going, didn't he, throughout the years?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he was a very ambitious guy. I mean, he did have a lot of talent. He had a very, very good voice, for one thing. He also had a lot of charm, a lot of panache. But of course, I mean, his real heyday I think he had his first hit in 1954, and then really up to the beginning of the 60s. But once more modern performers had come along, like Adam Faith, Tommy Steele, and then of course the Beatles, they swept all those old crooners away. But I mean, he did survive for a long, long time in the business. He was very, very much liked.
I mean, it looks, I mean, looking through his history, he was one of the first British artists to truly break America.
Yeah.
And at that time, of course, you know, they didn't have all the record label hype and the machinery behind them, so he must have just done it kind of on sheer talent.
He did it on talent and hard work, yes. I mean, he had none of the hype around him that the Americans would have had. And he had a lot of very, very good hits. I mean, and he also, I mean, he was quite a strange man in many ways. Though I say he was ambitious, I mean, he could have pursued a Hollywood career. He started a big film with Marilyn Monroe, who was reported tried to seduce him, and he turned her down because he was very, very faithful to his wife Stella. He could have had that career in Hollywood, but he didn't like it. He was a very, very British entertainer. We won't see the likes of him again.
And just briefly, his record company will obviously re-release a lot of his material.
Garden of Eden they should put out, and Green Door,
at some
big
stage.
hits.
Did you think the younger people will adapt to his music or not?
I mean, there is a lot of young people quite like kitsch, and they'll see him as a kind of a kitsch performer. So those records could be a hit. Yeah.
OK, thanks, Rick. More from him in just a moment. Well, one man who's known Frankie Vaughan since the 60s is fellow singing legend Tom Jones. Now, the pair both conquered Vegas and frequently appeared on each other's TV shows. Traditional showmen, their similar singing style and huge screen presence brought the pair legions of fans. As the two were the only British entertainers to break America at the time, they quickly became firm friends, something Tom Jones says was a huge help when he first went to the States.
I'd always admired him in the 50s, so I wanted to know what it was like in America because he had gone there. You know, he did a film with Marilyn Monroe and he met Elvis Presley, you know, and all those things. So I asked him a lot of questions. You know, Frankie Vaughan was a star. I mean, he came from the old school of entertainers. It was to get on stage and entertain. You know what I mean? Look as good as you could and sing the way you wanted to sing, but project. You know, the man had great projection. I thought that Frankie Vaughan had the best British voice in the 50s, because I always listened to American singers, you know, in the 50s. But Frankie was the one that I listened, or the only British singer that I really listened to. He contributed a lot to British show business, and I think he'll be remembered for that. So, you know, you've got to look at the good side of it, but it's very sad that the man, you know, has passed away.
Tom Jones paying tribute to Frankie Vaughan, who died Friday. Still ahead on this edition, why going digital will mean you're also going shopping. Kevin Costner explains why we shouldn't bother seeing his new film. And we meet a man who's made a career out of monkey business. It's all in 030 Screen News. Well, first the bad news. Every household in Britain is going to have to buy a new TV set, or at least modify its current one. The good news is we've still got up to 10 years to do it, so no need to rush down to the shops just yet. The government's announced British television could go fully digital and switch off analogue transmitters as early as 2006. Well, that means the vast majority of TV sets currently in use will become obsolete. Reporting for 030 is the BBC's media correspondent Nick Heim.
The Garrity family have 5 televisions, and in the biggest switch since colour replaced black and white, they'll all have to be replaced or modified to get the new digital broadcasts. It comes as news to the family that today's analogue television is being phased out.
I had assumed that it would just continue. I hadn't really appreciated that it was an either-or situation and that the advent of digital would effectively wipe out analogue. In fact, I probably hadn't even realised that analogue was what I already had.
The government wants to switch off hundreds of television transmitters like this and replace them with new, more efficient digital ones. Today, Chris Smith told a broadcasting conference in Cambridge the big switch will take place, but not until 95% of us have a digital set.
We recognise that it is our responsibility to give the industry as clear as possible a framework within which to plan investment. But it is our primary responsibility to ensure that consumers are fully informed and effectively protected.
The worry, what switch-off could mean for people like Bill and Thelma Taylor, with just their retirement pension to live on. Their reaction to being told they'll have to replace their sets?
I'd be horrified. I mean, there's hundreds of pounds between the 2 televisions. We couldn't just go out and buy now. Well, it'd be very difficult, wouldn't it?
It would indeed, yes.
Yes.
Currently, digital televisions are expensive. Mr. Smith says today's TVs won't become obsolete until digital sets are affordable by everybody, including those on low incomes. And the main free channels like BBC and ITV will have to be available digitally to everyone. Broadcasters were delighted.
Gives absolute confidence to manufacturers and to broadcasters and to viewers that the future is digital. They know that the next time they go out and buy a new television or receiving equipment, they are buying digital, and that's an investment in the future.
Chris Smith hopes he's pulled off a difficult balancing act, pleasing the television industry, which wants to go digital as quickly as possible, while reassuring viewers that they won't have to spend a fortune going digital against their will. Nick Hyam, BBC News, Cambridge.
More of the day's screen news now. Rather than wait for the critics to do it, Kevin Costner's got in early, giving a right old panning to his latest film before it's even released. He says his new movie's been ruined by studio interference. Costner's angry about cuts made to his new film, a baseball tale called For the Love of the Game, which opens in America tonight. Among the scenes which have ended up on the cutting room floor are shots of Kevin's most private bodily parts. The studio snipped out a full frontal shower scene and a couple of swear words in order to secure a family-friendly PG rating. Costner says as a result he'll never make another film for Universal Pictures. However, never say never again seems to be Harrison Ford's motto. After once claiming he'd had enough of his Indiana Jones character, he's now saying he may be prepared to pick up his bullwhip for another installment. The 57-year-old actor, who nowadays spends much of his time playing with his 4 aeroplanes, says, "No one wants to see an action hero having to pick up a walking cane to hit someone, but I'll still be fit enough to fake it. It's all smoke and mirrors anyway." And of course, we thought it was all real. Harrison's currently filming in New York with Michelle Pfeiffer. It looks like rock star turned actor turned rock star again. Sting won't be making a big screen comeback in the next installment of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. Brad Pitt is expected to star in Guy Ritchie's next gangster-themed film instead. However, Mr. Pitt has asked to use Sting's car in the film as a prop. The former Police frontman this week released his first new single for 3 years and claims he's not bothered about being snubbed. Someone else who's suffering from rejection tonight is Helena Bonham Carter. Her 5-year relationship with Kenneth Branagh has reportedly come to an end. The couple seen here chatting with Her Majesty became close whilst filming Branagh's ill-fated version of Frankenstein. The following year, he split from his then-wife Emma Thompson. Kenneth and Miss Bonham Carter star together in the new film The Theory of Flight, which debuts at British cinemas next week. Branagh is not expected to attend the premiere. Now, getting the world's most glamorous superstars to advertise products you wouldn't normally associate them with isn't exactly a new idea. Madonna has promoted Japanese alcoholic beverages, Caprice has tried to flog us prunes, and Tara Palmer-Tompkinson will forever be remembered for her breathtaking performance when she was actually out-acted by fried chicken. Now, even royalty has got in on the act, with the Duchess of York promoting Weight Watchers in America. But now, news that Daryl Hannah has become the face of high street giant, the British home stores. Even a name change to BHS hasn't persuaded everyone that the store is the pinnacle of high street chic. However, BHS are hoping that Daryl's new her quality will attract a host of trendy shoppers. No truth in the rumour, though, that Leonardo DiCaprio is about to play the part of Mr. Byright in a forthcoming ad campaign. He will, in fact, play his son, because he's not old enough. What about this point? The point about a marketing campaign like this, you have to get the right celebrity with the right product, or else it begins to look a little ridiculous. How have they done with this one?
With the Daryl Hannah one?
That's what we're talking about, yes.
The Daryl Hannah one? I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether Daryl Hannah is the right celebrity. She's certainly not particularly hot star these days, is she?
She's actually kind of retreated from Hollywood. I was reading an article about her where she's just gone to Montana to live on a ranch, and she's not really working in the industry.
I mean, she did, you know, I mean, she was she's an incredible beauty for a start, and she was a big Hollywood actress, but yes, she doesn't, I mean, one wonders why she's doing something like, one has to ask oneself why she's doing something like the BHS campaign. Obviously, there's a bit of money involved, but it isn't, as you quite rightly pointed out, it isn't exactly the sharpest store on the high street. I mean, its merchandise, you know, isn't that wonderful.
Rick Sky, you should be on QVC.
I should be. Selling BHS, maybe she will be on QVC.
I'd just like to say that represents, of course, the view of Mr. Rick Sky, not necessarily the BBC. Let's move on. Thank you very much for that. Now, you could say British director Sam Mendes is on something of a roll right now. First, his revival of Cabaret became the hottest ticket in Theatreland. Then his production of The Blue Room with Nicole Kidman set tongues wagging and other things in the West End and on Broadway. Now it seems he's pulled off the same trick with his very first feature film. American Beauty has caused a sensation at the Toronto Film Festival. Reporting from the event, 4030, here's Tom Brooke.
300 films have been screened in Toronto, but it's American Beauty, starring Kevin Spacey and Annette Bening, a dark comedy set in American suburbia, that's become the talk of the festival. Spacey plays a disillusioned magazine writer alienated from his materialistic wife and daughter. It's a story of the disintegration of two American families.
Don't interrupt me, honey.
American Beauty has definitely taken Toronto by storm. Critics are calling it a truly original work. It's seen as a very contemporary film that shines a none too flattering light on the ills of suburban America.
I love shooting this gun.
Whether it's the country's obsession with guns or alienated teenagers leading hidden lives, it's a film that resonates in a year when America has been rocked by suburban madness, like the teenage shootings at Columbine High School in Colorado.
What this film tries to do is to answer some of those questions that we find ourselves asking when events happen around the world and in the United States that we find shocking and debilitating and upsetting. And we say, how could a thing like that happen? And I think that American Beauty begins to examine some of why that kind of thing happens.
American Beauty's British director maintains he's fashioned a love story and a thriller, but he can also see how his film peers through the rosy veneer of suburban America to locate the madness within.
The things that have happened in the last year have been pretty terrifying, and they've happened while we're making the film. You know, Columbine and you know, this stuff about making bombs in the garage next door. You know, there's a lot of that that's touched on in this movie, and it remains a disturbing aspect of life here. You know.
There is a lot that's harrowing and disturbing in the film, but ultimately, do you see it as an optimistic picture?
Yes, genuinely, I really do, and I know that sounds odd, considering it's a movie about a man who has his brains blown out at the end.
Other British talent has been in evidence in Toronto.